This is an opportunity for you to really hear a little bit more about the political challenges and I suppose the political aspirations. We heard from the Roads Minister earlier on at the top of the day. Let's go down to the local level. Let me introduce Daniel Zeitcher, Labour MP for Cambridge and a Transport Select Committee member. Daniel, welcome. Are you mic'd? You've got a... Don't worry, welcome. Do join us, and also to I'll introduce David, Councillor David Renard, leader of the Swindon Council. Where is David? He's behind me. Oh, there we go. I thought you weren't here yet. Welcome to. I'm going to give these two, I suppose, 5 or 10 minutes just to make their case about how you see the challenge facing the Heartland and I suppose the opportunity facing the Heartland, and then we're going to steam into some questions which maybe lead in a tee off from some of the points that were made by the audience. So, Daniel, do you want to kick off? Sure. Yeah, do use the lectern. Yeah.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for giving me the chance to speak to you today. As has been said, I'm a member of the Transport Select Committee, which means tomorrow morning I've got the opportunity to quiz Chris Grayling, which you may have my sympathy or you may think is a great opportunity. But one of the things I will be asking him will be about this issue. My interest in this comes partly because everyone always wants a bit of Cambridge, whether you're going east, west, north, south. Cambridge is always part of where people want to connect to. But it's also because I've had a long-term interest in regions. And one of the questions I'm asking myself, and listening to the previous discussion just now, is what role members of Parliament and Parliament should have in these kind of discussions. Because quite frankly, I think we've got a governance problem. And I think it's something that people like Sir John Armitt have highlighted when they look at the number of authorities across the Arc. And I ask myself, why aren't my colleagues flocking to events like this? Now, it may partly be because they're getting grief on it, as we've heard from some. But I think actually it's a structural problem. I think we've got a gap between what happens at Westminster and what happens locally. And possibly I would say this, I'm going to try and make this a non-partisan presentation. But I think that lack of regional structures is a real problem, which is why we are seeing things like subnational transport bodies emerging. And I pay tribute to Martin and his team, because I think part of the reason I've got interested in this, because initially my interest was I have to say, much more London, Stansted, Cambridge, much more north-south. But I've come to the view that we're actually part of a bigger region, and it's interesting that people talk about the region without necessarily wanting to define exactly what it is. But my interest comes because I can see a gap there. And I was much taken by the announcement back in the budget when Philip Hammond gave his budget and announced there was I forget what it's called now, it was a government ambition and joint declaration. And the Chancellor invited interested MPs to come meet the Housing Minister the following day for a briefing on it. I thought there'd be a stampede. Turned out to be a very interesting one-to-one conversation with Kit Mulhouse. And very interesting, not least because I have to say, this is no disrespect to Kit, I don't think he was expecting anybody. So we had a very nice chat, and I was able to raise some of my concerns, some of the concerns that have been raised here. So I think we really have got a governance problem. Now, MPs are a bit like a canary in the mine, I think. They tend to respond when constituents start badgering them. So I'm not surprised that we're hearing from people on the Oxford end of this road, because we know it's highly controversial. I had to say less controversial in my part of the world, because as has been said, there is a broad consensus that the road needs to be improved out to Caxton Gibbet. But my question is, we've got a governance problem, have we also not got a vision problem too? And I think that leads us to this big fraught problem of where's the public in all this? Because frankly, unless you know what it's for, you're going to have a hard job persuading the public to support it. Because if the only bit they see is their bit, and it looks like it's a problem for them, then it's not a very easy thing to sell to people, is it? And I kind of think I stand back from this and think, well, if your basic question is, how are we going to have a thriving economy, a more environmentally sustainable economy in 10, 20 years' time, whoever's in government, obviously I'd like my side to be in government, but it's going to be the same problem whoever's in government, what are the things you're going to have to do? It's one of the questions I frequently pose around Cambridge, because a lot of my colleagues say, well, what have you got to worry about? Cambridge is incredibly successful. say, yeah, but it's not guaranteed in future unless we make the right decisions. So this is about, and exactly as was said earlier, future generations. How are they going to have that sustainable, successful economic backdrop to their lives? And I think that's the bit we're missing, frankly. It's the vision, and I say I've been critical at previous events. It seems odd to me that you can be designing roads and railways without being very clear about what they're for, and I entirely echo the comments earlier about the rail line. I keep asking these questions. Is it a freight line? Is it a fast line from Oxford to Cambridge? Is it a stopping line? Is this a jobs-led initiative or a housing-led initiative? Now, it may be all of those things, but you've got to have some clarity on it. So I think that's the challenge we've got at the moment. I'm trying to persuade some of my colleagues in Parliament to get more involved in it, because I genuinely think it is important for the future, whatever happens. I'll give you my thinking on this, which is strong support for the railway. I have to say the road superhighway concept seems not to be attracting a huge amount of support. In fact, I would say when you look at the government's vision statement, the first time it gets a mention is on about page 25. So I think you can draw your own conclusions. But we're in a time of political uncertainty, to put it mildly. There will be a new government of one sort or another within weeks, probably. New secretaries of state, new ministers. So it is a time of great opportunity. And one of the things which has troubled me in the past is we see other parts of the country getting their act together in terms of the Midlands engine, the Northern Powerhouse. I mean, they're all terms, but it does reflect the fact that people are doing stuff on the ground. I've tried to encourage people in the East to make sure that we are getting our act together too, to make sure that we're making the case to government. So I'm very grateful, as I say, to Martin and his team, who I think are doing a terrific job on this. My final point is that these kind of big projects, they do need, it seems to me, long-term certainty and continuity. If you're going to ask people to invest, you've got to have some sense that there's some sense of political certainty about the future. So one of the other things I try and do is talk to my colleagues on my side to make sure that if we're in government at any point, we understand why the decisions have been made. So it doesn't tie us to everything. Certainly, I think I would be surprised if Labour supported the road in its current form. But in general, I think it's really important that we have political consensus for these long-term plans. It's easy for government ministers to announce these grand schemes and then basically leave it to local people to try and sort out how it makes it work. I think in 10, 20 years when we look back, if we got this right, it could well be that we are able to transfer some of the huge success that we see in places like Cambridge throughout the region, and that would be a fantastic achievement. But we'll only do it if we have these kind of conversations, but ultimately we'll only be able to do it if we take the public with us, and we can only do that if we explain to them that it's actually going to benefit them in terms of their quality of life.
Thank you. Daniel, before you move on, can I just put one point to you around this? Vision. I really understand that, the point you make around the need for vision, and I suppose vision really kind of underlines, it comes from, what's the value you're generating from this investment? As a politician, I mean, do you think you really understand value? How do you know that your value as a politician matches the value in the communities, the social value or the economic value that's seen? How do you actually get that match right, and so therefore you get that vision correct?
Well, it's a very, very, very big question, and I'm not sure I would claim to know the answer to it. What I would say is that anyone, and there were plenty of people in this room, who are well experienced with trying to engage the public, trying to run consultations. I don't actually think in the end it is, whether it's an app or whether it's traditional, a lot of it will require local politicians to actually go and be talking to people, listening to people. But you can't expect, I don't think, people along the route, 24, 25 different authorities, to guess for themselves what the value is. That's why you need strong leadership, I would say, from the top. And that's where the vision comes from. And I had to say at the moment, and this will be my partisan point, if you like, is we've heard talk of a ministerial champion or a business champion. We need to get on with that so that someone can explain to the people along this area what effect it's going to have on their lives and why it will be better. Because if it's not better, then don't do it. And that's got to mean better in a number of different ways, particularly in terms of environmental sustainability at the moment. But
you heard the points that were made around engaging with the people that this 30-year vision is going to impact. I mean, do you think that when you sit there in your select Transport Committee, there's enough realisation that you need to talk to people who, are currently still at school.
You try, and it's obviously a big balancing exercise. But if you can't answer the question why it's going to be better for a school leaver in the north of Cambridge or in any of the schools and colleges along this route, if you can't answer that question, then you're not going to be able to persuade them. And you can't just force it on people, because what you'll get is a backlash, and we're already seeing it in some parts, which will make it very difficult to deliver.
Daniel, thank you very much. We're going to hear a bit more, put some questions a bit later on, but right now, Daniel Zatner, thank you very much. Do join us here. Councillor David Renard, leader of Swindon Council. What's I suppose, the slightly more local political level? How do you see this opportunity here?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Delighted to come here and give a local government perspective. Swindon, as you know, is on the southwest edge of England's economic heartland, and I was very keen that we should be involved in this after it was initially set up, because I believe we've got a strategic role to play in the ambitions of the heartland as a whole, benefiting both Swindon and the heartland and beyond. Swindon's a very successful economy. For those of you that read the Centre for Cities annual outlook report, you'll see that we're the 8th most productive urban centre in the country. And our focus at the moment is on growing the economy and town centre revitalisation, and supporting our key business sectors and making all of that sustainable. And we have some major urban extensions, some of which will impact on the work of the EEH. So in your transport study strategy that you've got today, you'll see on pages 64 and 65 some work that we're doing around the bus boulevard in the town centre. We've got some money from the local growth fund to invest in that, and we've also been successful in moving through to the next stage of the High Streets, Future High Streets Fund. So we've also got Kimmerfields, which is a new commercial and residential quarter in the centre of Swindon, now with the electrification of the main line, just 50 minutes from London. And we're delighted that Zurich Insurance have recommitted their headquarters to Swindon. They want a brand new one building just a few minutes from the railway station, which is, and the whole of that area is worth about £200 million, some of which is owned by Homes England. So we're working closely in partnership with them on that flagship scheme. Near the railway station, we've got the Carriage Works, which is part of Brunel's railway works that he set up 170 odd years ago. And we've turned that into a Digitech incubator space. And we've got the Royal Agricultural University currently developing part of that site for their use to add to our higher education offer. And then we've got the North Star Village, £270 million worth of investment, creating a new regional leisure centre. In terms of urban extensions and housing growth, we've got Whitchelstow to the south, about 3,500 houses, a joint venture between the council and David Wilson Homes. And perhaps of more importance to this audience is the New Eastern Villages, which goes right up to the edge of our boundary with Oxfordshire. Development of about 8,000 houses, with all the infrastructure that needs to go into that, and of course the A420, which a number of you will have heard me raise before in this forum, is really crucial, and we're spending a lot of money on upgrading the two major roundabouts on our end of the A420. But we need to do a lot more, and there are 100 landowners involved in that particular development, so that's hugely complex. In terms of our business growth, we have a lot in common with other major centres in EEH. We've got significant sectors in pharmaceuticals, digital, and of course established sectors in automotive, business and financial services. We've got companies such as Nationwide, Intel, Zurich, the research councils, Innovate UK and the UK Space Agency. In her presentation earlier on, Naomi referred to BMW in Oxford. A lot of people won't realise that the panels for the Mini are actually made in Swindon, which is why the A420 is so crucial, not only for travellers but for our businesses in terms of upgrading that major route. We have a scheme called Switch On to Swindon, which is business-led. Over 700 ambassadors representing large, small and medium businesses in Swindon. We recently launched a Tech Swindon programme to encourage higher levels of investment in that agenda. And we've also been successful in getting a bid recently for the Institute of Technology to strengthen our need and demand for higher education qualifications. So Swindon joined England's economic heartland because I believe Swindon looks to the east primarily, not only to London or Heathrow, but also to Oxford and beyond, which is why I think it's all very well to talk about the Oxford to Cambridge link, but actually if we're truly talking about east-west connectivity, we need to be looking at Bristol to Swindon to Oxford to Cambridge and then off to the East Coast ports and places like Norwich. So I think the transport strategy makes it clear that this isn't just about the geography of EEH, and it does look much beyond that as well. We also want to work with EEH in terms of strengthening rail connections. At the moment, if you want to go from Swindon to Oxford, you have to change at Didcot. So I'd very much like to see the doubling of the train line between Swindon and Didcot in order to make the reintroduction of those services possible. So we'd like to improve levels of connectivity. We believe we've got a dynamic and productive economy which can contribute to the overall effort of the region and want to be active parts of the Strategic Transport Board. I think what EEH can help us with is the capacity and capability. Some of the qualities of the reports and studies that have come out from EEH, which my officers have contributed to, have been really useful, and I know that they valued the opportunity to work with EEH officers on that. So in summary, we're happy to be part of EEH, and as well as being a dynamic and thriving economy in its own right, Swindon is at the fulcrum of great economic regions, EEH to the east, and of course you'll have heard about the recent launch of the Great Western Powerhouse, and we're on the eastern edge of that particular project as well. So we're fantastically connected, which is one of the reasons why Swindon is so successful, and we want to build on that in the coming years.
David, thank you very much. A point about the vision to you again is, you are on the opposite end of the arc, to Cambridge. I mean, how do you make sure that your vision that represents the values in your region is actually represented by the strategy that's been put together by EEH?
Well, I spend a lot of time talking to the other political leaders, and we make sure that we're all, I think, on the same page. But clearly there are controversies and disagreements around things like the routes of the ARC.
Yeah, because you want investment in your area, as Daniel wants investment in Cambridge. There are some internal. How do you get over those internal rivalries?
I think we just get in a room and talk them through, to be honest. But there will be local nuances because I've got my particular preference in terms of the ARC route, purely because I want to see the A420 upgraded, because I think that will add value to the businesses in my area and indeed the people who commute to Oxford. And I think we've got something to add to. Our housing costs are very low in Swindon, and obviously Oxford's very high. So I think there's a synergy and a trade-off there where both major centres can benefit. Okay,
take a seat. We're going to open it up to questions. Any points that people want to make directly to our politicians here? We've got a throwable microphone. Anyone? Yeah, at the back there, yeah. Is it the man in white again? Yes. Is the microphone anywhere near him? Anyone got a microphone? Yeah. Shall I shout? You can shout. Well, I'm going to throw that. So
the need for people to move around, the need for people to move around is going to be dramatically affected. And I think that's an issue that needs to be taken into account.
So the need for transport, therefore, will be changing vastly. What kind of impact do you think? What kind of thoughts do you have around that, Daniel?
Well, I do a lot of work on data in Parliament. I run the all-party group on data analytics, and you're right, it could be transformational, but I wouldn't hold your breath. For the vast majority of people, I'm not sure we're going to see a huge transformation very quickly. For a lot of people, it's still going to be about going to see their families, going to work, doing the basic jobs. So, yes, we can do things much more efficiently, quite probably, but I'm not sure this is going to come quite as quickly as people think. And I think what we've got to do is plan on the basis of what we already know to be the case, rather than getting too diverted into things which will come, but we can see already at the moment there are plenty of. I mean, some of this isn't complicated, frankly. Just having a joined-up bus system in most of our cities would get us a long way at the moment, and we don't need lots of complicated technology to solve that. Frankly, we just need to crack, going back to my earlier point, some of the governance problems. I'm afraid these are political points, some of them.
David, one of the things that politicians do like to do is cut ribbons on big projects. So some of these sort of smaller ones that maybe these good ideas don't make it to the funding pot.
Well, local authorities clearly have to prioritise their spend, and I think Mayor Dave mentioned it earlier on. Most of our money now goes on adult and children's social care. So we do have to prioritise very rigorously when it comes to spending on infrastructure, and government funding is clearly key for all of us in that respect. I mean, I do take the point made, but I agree with Daniel. It's about connectivity, and that's one of the reasons why the bus boulevard in Swindon is so important, because it is about making sure that people who either come in by bus or coach or train can get onto another mode of transport very quickly and easily.
Okay. Any more questions, any more points that people want to raise in the room? Where is he? He's running. Here we go. Sorry, I couldn't. What happened to that? Who's stolen the throw back? Can you throw it to the guy at the back there as well? There you go. Here and there. There's a guy with the black. Yeah, far away.
The one person missing today is someone from central government. When I look back and think of the Minister of Transport has acted. He's ruined the Great Western electrification. He's chopped bits off arbitrarily to demonstrate how what a clever politician is, saving money. And that will impact upon the East-West Road.
David, politicians are just basically making mistakes have always been made by politicians.
Well, politicians are human beings, and everybody makes mistakes, so you can't deny that. But I think all politicians make what they regard to be the best decision that they can at that moment in time with the information in front of them. And clearly, events overtake us sometimes, and they prove to be wrong. But obviously, I'm absolutely delighted with the electrification of the main line, because with the new timetable coming in, Swindon will only be 50 minutes away from Paddington. So I've got no complaints about electrification of the main line.
One person's dream is another person's nightmare. Far away, yeah, we bang on our time limit, but carry on.
So, James Cleave, Mobility Lab. Actually, I'd like to pick up a point which Daniel's raised about governance, and just ask the question, what are the correct powers at what level? Because the way in which transport governance is set up in the UK is local authorities really have very little transport powers. So, mention the example of buses, where local authorities pretty much have no powers at all unless they try and work with the bus companies. So, is there therefore an argument to be made of decentralising powers away from Westminster in relation to transport powers, particularly for major schemes and improvements in strategic infrastructure, to the likes of the Heartland or to local authorities?
Daniel, are you going to devolve many more of your powers?
I think it is overwhelmingly the case that the current system is a mess. I mean, frankly, when you look at it, local economic partnerships, 39 of them replacing 6 regional development agencies. I mean, not trying to make a political point here, but I don't think anyone could look at our current structures and say this works for us. Cambridgeshire, we've got a mayoralty. I'm afraid that also has got its problems because the powers are shared between various levels. I think you look to other countries, you'd see they do much better with much simpler structures. I've long been a supporter of unitary local government, and if I had a magic wand, I would make it much simpler, devolve many more powers down, and I think we could do quite a lot more with what we have.
Dan, you've got to go and catch your bus, but is this a model for the future for you? Is this
the subnational transport? Well, frankly, I go for a simpler system because I think we've just got too many councils, too many layers. Personally, if you had a blank sheet of paper, you would not come up with this. But of course, we live in a country without a constitution, which has some interesting relationships with the wider world to sort out as well. We have got to come up with better governance structures, though, because without that, we are going to be going on having these conversations, and we're going to be letting down our citizens.
David and Daniel, thank you very much. I'm going to call it to a close now because we had a break for lunch. So thank you very much to Daniel and to David for our political point of view.